The year was 1948. A disillusioned writer created a satiric vision of life in a totalitarian state. What to call the book? George Orwell decided to reverse the last two digits of the year. 1948 became 1984, and the novel became the classic vision of a world where the state is all, the individual nothing. Well, now that we've reached the real 1984, how does our life measure up against Orwell's terrifying vision? Here's Jack Smith.
This is 1984, the book, and this is the world of 1984. Today, most people in it live under repressive government, and a full third of the world's nations torture and kill their citizens for their beliefs. It seems Orwellian, a term burned into our minds by this remarkable book. It was written 35 years ago by George Orwell, a left-wing British intellectual. He fought in the Spanish Civil War, but found to his shock that the Soviet Union, which supported the side of democracy, was just as authoritarian as the Spanish fascists.
He felt that it wasn't a war for the freedom of the Spanish people at all. It was a war for extending the influence of Stalinist communism, and therefore of Russia.
Under the shadow of the great dictators and the ravages of the Second World War, Orwell poured out his disillusionment and wrote this manuscript, a story about something which, he said, could happen, a totalitarian world as depicted here in the movie version of his book.
Who are you? 6748 Smith W. Where do you work? In the Ministry of Truth.
It was a world where the police watched one's every move through telescreens, where children spied on parents, and where human affection was forbidden. Against all the rules, though, the hero, Winston Smith, falls in love.
They can't get the sight of us.
But they do. Arrested and brainwashed by the thought police, Winston betrays his lover and comes instead to love the one-party state and its embodiment, Big Brother. The book has been translated into 62 languages. It's required reading in most schools, and in the U.S. alone has sold 10 million copies. It endures because it deals with what's perhaps our main preoccupation, freedom.
I think the book is a satire. It is not a prophecy, but on the other hand, the things he was satiring in 1948, I'm afraid most of them are still with us in 1984.
The book bears a chilling resemblance to events in our lifetime. Big Brother has appeared in China, life is regimented in the Soviet Union, and the Khmer Rouge are thought to have killed 2.5 million Cambodians in the name of collectivism. New dictators always seem to take the place of the old, and Orwell's fear of perpetual war seems horribly real. There are, right now, some 40 wars being fought around the globe. The world presents a bleak picture. But Orwell's book was set in the West, not the Third World, and what worried Orwell was that totalitarianism, as it existed, would spread here to the Western democracies. This is Orwell's London today. The West just doesn't look like the place of his nightmares, or does it? The fact is that most of the machinery of his repressive state exists today. Mind-bending drugs, paper shredders, lie detectors, and also the two-way telescreen.
She can even put the system in control.
A Harris poll this fall showed the number of Americans very concerned about threats to their privacy had risen to 48%, and with reason. There's much more surveillance today than there was in Orwell's time. We are watched in the subway, we are watched where we shop, and increasingly in the workplace as well. And almost everything we do nowadays, from filling out a form to drawing money from the bank, is recorded in a computer. Private companies like insurance firms and credit agencies have therefore accumulated vast files on most Americans, and these files can be shared. These are the computer tapes of the Internal Revenue Service, and the IRS last year finally got access to the profiles of Americans in the data banks of private mail-order firms.
We are under surveillance very much, certainly almost to the extent that Orwell describes in 1984. Now, the motivation is different, but it's very easy for the motivation of a government or a society to change.
True, but abuses can and have been stopped. Congressional hearings in the 1970s put a halt to illegal domestic spying by the CIA and other government agencies. And whereas in Orwell's time there was nothing to limit snooping, today there are dozens of federal and state laws to protect the individual.
All the technology that we've put into place has not brought us one step closer to Orwell's state than when he wrote in 1949, because our free institutions and our distrust of government and our mechanism for controlling government still remain very strong.
The technology of totalitarianism may exist today, but the social will to use it does not, because we live under law and elect our leaders. Nevertheless, modern life can seem Orwellian. We are crowded into big cities and work in large offices. TV is homogenized, and advertising bombards us with hype. Anonymity and conformity today menace the individualism Orwell held so dear.
He felt that he and every single person who clung to this idea of being free, of forming opinions, of having beliefs, that he was we were all being sucked into a kind of uniformity.
Still, the fact remains that in the West today, people do pretty much what they want. They worship as they wish, they love whomever they please, and though the way we live may be changing, people still enjoy life, for its basis remains multiplicity, not conformity, freedom, not control. We seem then to have taken Orwell seriously, and that's perhaps all that he intended. Not a prophecy, but a warning, which is still worth listening to. Jack Smith, ABC News, Washington.
That's our report on world news tonight. For everyone at ABC News, I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.